Well, John, it's an interesting day for everybody. The laptop from hell seems to be back from hell. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, Jason. Good to see you. I think we've
Likewise.
got an exciting show tonight. I'm looking forward to this. This is going to be interesting.
Yeah. I was just, I didn't get a chance to see this yet, but I was just looking at some news. Putin has done a rally that everybody is saying, make Russia great again. I think, look, when you see someone doing something successful and then model your behavior after that, that's not stupid.
I think Anthony Robbins documented this. Tony Robbins
What do you mean?
said there's, well, that was sort of the essence of Tony Robbins' original program, maybe 30 years ago, was you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You just have to model success after somebody else's success and just, change it a little bit, but you don't have to reinvent the wheel. And
Yeah. And I think Putin's observed Trump had a lot of success rallying the public. He's even said that Trump is a bright man. And he corrected a British guy on the translation who said that Putin had called him brilliant. And Putin said, I don't think I said he was brilliant. I said he was bright. And this is one example of what Putin might have been talking about. He's saying, you know what? This is perhaps an unconventional approach to traditional politics, but it worked. It got people enthusiastic about the Trump presidency and his agenda and everything. And if you're Russian living in Russia and have relatives in Ukraine who are telling you that they're being attacked by Nazified gangs, and then the president of the place is saying the same thing, we're going to go defend them, I could imagine you might support that.
well, the other thing is the subtext here. So the subtext is it's the 8th anniversary of the independence of Crimea and Sevastopol. And so basically he's throwing a party and saying, hey, remember when we annexed Crimea? That was 8 years ago. Hey,
But
we
see,
did,
this is a point of contention because this annexing of Crimea, some people basically consider it an invasion, but I believe Putin has corrected those people and said that there was a referendum and that the people in these regions voted to come under the protection of and be reintegrated back into Russia. I think there was a bit of a gaffe from Candace Owens where she said something about, Ukraine was a creation of Russia and blah, blah, blah. I think what she means is that it was only 30-ish years ago that all of these independent former Soviet republics had their own referendums to leave the Soviet Union. So the notion that a section of one of these newly established states there'd be some back and forth and some realigning of borders and allegiances and things like that. It's not like we're talking about some 3,000-year-old border that the guy has penetrated violently, at least with regard to this Crimea being reintegrated into Russia. I mean, that's what the debate is. The problem that I have is when people just say, oh, there's no reason, and the other party is saying, actually, there's a reason, you're refusing to debate the merits of the reason by saying there isn't one, that's different.
well, then that also leads to availability heuristic bias, meaning when the news media doesn't report an aspect of the
Right.
story, everybody thinks, well, there's no reason for Putin to do this. He's just a really bad guy. He's out of control. He's the new Hitler,
Right.
and there's no rationale for what he's doing. Well, that's availability heuristic bias, meaning you just haven't heard the rationale. He has served up the rationale. You just haven't
Yeah.
heard it. And that's what we've been doing on this show for the last couple of weeks, is looking for rationale, looking for why would this be happening? And is it necessarily the stuff that we hear on television, or are the reasons maybe a little bit more complicated and maybe a little bit more embarrassing to the administration than the administration would like discussed? Right. So in other words, to think for a moment that the United States and its actions might have something to do with the war in Ukraine is almost anathema, right? You're not even allowed to even think that, I don't think, right? Are we allowed to even think that anymore, Jason? I don't think we're allowed to think that.
I
If
don't
we
know.
are,
It's
you have to give me permission to think it, or maybe we got to call, what's her name, Wizicki or something, and say, oh, am I allowed to think that? I don't
it's
know.
just disgraceful. The censorship and the suppression that's going on. John, before we get into too many details about what we're going to discuss tonight in your deck and later on the sponsor exclusive segment, I want to make sure that people know that they can subscribe to the John E. Hoover YouTube channel. It's totally free. People can watch simulcasts of our broadcasts there. And if you turn on the, this is really amazing technology, you turn on the closed captions, you can get that. And John's got loads of videos on the John E. Hoover channel that he's created. People are going to want to watch those and hear the bedtime stories about everything Tulsi Gabbard said and see our back episodes and John's independent episodes. John, also, there was an unfortunate set of circumstances this morning where the CrowdSource the Truth Twitter account has been permanently removed, suspended, deleted. Basically, there's a lot of social engineering trolls who follow my every single move, and they've developed a variety of tactics that are intended to basically, oh yeah, you see, this is now not an account, so it wants me to follow you. I do have another account. I'll bring that up for everybody to see in just a minute, but John's got 2,800 followers on Twitter. If you're not following him there yet, please do. And, these malicious social engineers, John, what they try to do is they work you up into some sort of a fight or a conflict and get you to say or do something that ticks the boxes on Twitter as far as violating the rules, and then they go and report you, I mean, Twitter obviously has a lot of rules, but they are not monitoring every single one of the billion accounts all day, so people should watch out for this kind of behavior. Anybody who wants to stay up on CrowdSource the Truth information can follow my personal Twitter account, jgoodman_CSTT. That's on Twitter. And I will continue to tweet. I think I know who might be behind this, but you never really know. It's just a guess.
Now, you had 27,000, 28,000 followers on Twitter?
Yeah.
And they just killed the account, just boom, gone. Everything.
Twitter. Yeah, they don't care about how many people are there, but the social engineers care about what's there, because by destroying this account, they've destroyed links to evidence, and they've made it more difficult for some of the things that I'm trying to bring out. It's amazing. A lot of people saw the counter lawfare report shows that I've been doing lately, John, where I've presented evidence that is highly suggestive that felonies have been committed. And the people who are accused of those felonies, they're not presenting countermanding evidence that should be in their possession if what I'm saying is incorrect. They're just striking my accounts and filing frivolous lawsuits and all kinds of things like that. So I hope that people will check out that counter lawfare report and come to their own conclusions. What are we going to be talking about tonight, John, in less than 20 minutes when we transition over to subscribestar.com/IamJohnCullen, patreon.com/IamJohnCullen, and Subscribestar and Patreon/CrowdSourceTheTruth.
I put together a video December 30th of 2020 that I was unable to publish on YouTube because of the censorship around the topic. And now we have the New York Times validating, if you go to the first slide of my deck, the New York Times has said that the emails were obtained by the New York Times from a cache of files that appears to have come from a laptop abandoned by Mr. Biden at a Delaware repair shop. Okay. The email and others in the cache were authenticated by people familiar with them and with the investigation. So this is as per the New York Times. Now, the issue is that back in October of 2020, Jen Psaki said, this is before she was press secretary or White House communications chief. I forget what her title is. I don't know if she's a press secretary.
Yeah.
But she said that the Hunter Biden story is Russian disinformation. Right below that tweet, right? So Jen Psaki says Hunter Biden's story is Russian disinfo. Dozens of former intel officials say, and she cites Politico. Now, this was October 20th of 2020. Now, if you go to the next page, you'll see the actual tweet. All right. So she said that this is Russian disinformation. Now, what we found out just, today or yesterday, whatever, is that the New York Times is saying, no, it's kind of real. Now, NPR also did a story on it and confirmed the existence of the laptop. Jim Jordan's been talking about it, stuff like that. So at this stage, there's no question that it exists. That's been documented. And there are emails and photos that we're going to look at. But what's exciting about tonight's show is we're going to be sharing with the audience the video testimony of John Paul MacIsaac, the guy who
Where was that
received
published?
the laptop. I got it, baby. Come on. What do you think this is?
Wow. Amazing.
So we have his video testimony. We're going to play that for our audience tonight, a clip. And then after the patron-only show, I'm going to be publishing, it's about a 1 hour long documentary in John Paul MacIsaac's words. So now you're going to get to hear from the guy that took in this laptop at this Delaware repair shop and hear it in his words. And then you get to decide, is this a Russian asset? Is this a Russian disinformation guy? Is this guy working for Putin? All right, so you're going to get to hear it in his words. Now, I don't know the veracity of anything. I'm just reporting, right? I'm just reporting. I'm not saying it's true or false. I want the audience to help us figure that out. I don't know the answer to that. So we're going to look at that. On the next slide I had in the deck, I just have a couple breaks I want to share with you.
Before we move off of that, John, I want to let people know that when we do transition to that sponsor exclusive segment in about 15 minutes, I have a theory I've been thinking about, a hypothesis based on the information that's available with regard to this laptop at the Delaware shop that I don't know if people have thought about it like this before, but we're going to talk about that during the sponsor exclusive segment. So it's going to be a good reason for people to want to tune in. If they're not already sponsors, now is a great time to become one. And what have we got right here?
I took a look at these new statistics. A number of the doctors who are online, like Nicole Safier and some of these other doctors that appear on television and have a pretty big online presence, have been talking about how the CDC modified some of the death counts for children. And I reran the pediatric deaths for school-age children. This is 5 to 17 years old in the United States. How many kids died with COVID? And the number worked out to be 574. This was this week. Out of the total 966,000 deaths. Well, that represents 0.059% of those COVID deaths. All right, so when you look at the total number of people who died in the United States and you say, well, what percentage of them were school-age children? The answer is 0.059%.
Unusually low, Brett.
Unusually low, Brett.
Extraordinarily low.
Yes. All right. So who knew back on February 25th that the show that we were doing was going to cause such controversy? I didn't know it at the time. If you go to the next slide. So we did a slide on the 25th of February. We did a show. And I think this was kind of the watershed moment. It seems that a bunch of people had been talking about this in the 8chan world of, bulletin board
well,
nonsense.
YouTube as well. We had John Mark Dugan and Dilyana. People were on this story, but you're absolutely right. It didn't really break through into the public consciousness until we did this. And then Tucker Carlson, we have got some indicators that Tucker Carlson or his producers or somebody working for him watches this show. We know they used the segment, including video of me, where I interviewed Alan Dershowitz. Right, and I know he's paying attention to what Charles says. So there is a fair likelihood that people for Tucker Carlson saw this here, and then when he said it, they said, okay, we got to do something because now it's starting to get out.
Right. But again, 3 weeks ago, the invasion was 1 day old. And the existence of this had been documented by this Diliana, who still hasn't responded to me reaching out to her.
Yeah, she's not going to.
So it had been documented, but nobody was really connecting the invasion with the U.S. investment in these things. Now, we were never saying that they were U.S. laboratories. We never said that. We said they're Ukrainian. Right.
Funded.
Yeah. But the US DOD, we found the receipts. And on the next slide, this is what we were sharing with the audience back on February 25th. And this was from the US Embassy in the Ukraine. So it's like, how much more pure a source could you possibly have than the US Embassy in Ukraine, right? That's like the best source possible.
Well, but then the Undersecretary of State confirmed that there are biological facilities, and she's concerned about Russian troops getting their hands on the research materials.
Right. And then on the next slide, you and I shared with our patron-only audience these video clips from the U.S. Embassy that had been put together two years ago, though. 2 years ago. So this is where we talk about this availability heuristic bias. When people say, well, there's no reason for Putin to be doing what he's doing. No, you didn't hear the reason when they were talking about it. So tonight, our patrons are going to hear a video testimonial from the Russian ambassador to the United Nations, I believe, or the spokeswoman. And she's going to talk about these labs and the U.S. investment in them. And so it almost seems like, look, from a negotiation standpoint, you want to try and understand the person on the other side of the table and what their motivations are.
Not just deny their statements.
Right. And say it's propaganda.
That's not
it's propaganda. It's all propaganda. Yeah. It's propaganda. So this video that we shared with the audience from 2 years ago from the U.S. Embassy was claiming that the Russian concerns were propaganda. Now, I remember the Cuban Missile Crisis, and when Russia wanted to put missile batteries in Cuba, and we were like, whoa,
were you alive?
That's a little bit close to home. Yeah, of course I was alive then. I don't remember it well, but I was alive then. So I remember when Martin Luther King was killed. That I remember vividly.
Wow.
It was the first and only time I ever saw my grandfather cry was when Martin Luther King was killed. Yeah. It just knocked him for a loop. He was devastated. Yeah, I remember that vividly. But the Cuban Missile Crisis, Russia wanted to put missile batteries in Cuba. And we were like, whoa, that's too close to home. We can't allow that, right? We can't let that happen. And if we're funding, I don't know, 8, 10, a dozen labs, Tulsi Gabbard says there's 20 or 30, I don't know. But we found the receipts. You and I literally were looking at the DOD, said 1.7 million, 1.8 million. They're here in the deck. We have them. We'll look at them tonight again. But the idea is there's a lot of people saying that these were false claims. This is Russian propaganda. And I published a video last night where I did a bedtime story reading the transcript of Tucker Carlson talking about how everything. So here was the title. Everything Tulsi Gabbard said about Ukraine biolabs was true. That was the title of his show or his segment. And it's interesting that they almost used Tulsi Gabbard as a stand-in. Like
for who?
Like for us. Meaning everything she said about the Ukraine biolab. What the hell did Tulsi Gabbard say about Ukraine biolabs? What she said was biolabs in a war zone could be dangerous.
Right.
That's what she said. It's like
Well, but
nobody's
the thing that
worried
was
about
so
15
weird,
biolabs downrange of missiles, right? So that's
the thing that
about
I've been
all she said.
observing on
Yeah.
Tucker Carlson that's weird
Mhm.
is he's finding these remarkable ways to say like, hey, biolabs and whatever, and but Putin is evil and we should still go to war with Russia. And I'm kind of like confused by what's going on with Tucker Carlson. He seems to be really Putin's evil and there's no reason for this, but look at these biolabs.
No, I think recently, since the biolab
He's
twist,
changed.
I think he's starting to say, hey, wait a second. Is this NATO rationale and the biolab rationale? A little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of the other story, the Donetsk story, the Donbass region story, and you
Right.
weave that together, and then you take a minute, and I think what Tucker has been saying is, how about we just listen to them for
It's
5
too late.
minutes?
It's
Yeah,
too
and
late.
just what do they want?
It's too late.
And
because
then I hear people saying, how come Putin didn't say this 2 weeks ago? Because Putin
he's
said
been
it 2
saying it for
years
8
ago.
years.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the issue. That's the point. And that's availability heuristic bias. That's when you simply haven't heard about it because the news doesn't tell you this stuff.
Yeah.
That's it.
And the reason
That's it.
I'm saying it's too late is not because I think that Russia is a country of evil people who don't want to negotiate. It's because yesterday, Dmitry Medvedev, former president, current minister of Russia's security, deputy secretary of Russia's Security Council, said that the United States had stoked a disgusting Russophobic hoax intended to disrupt and ultimately destroy Russia. I agree with him based on the evidence that I've seen, not because of what he said. But this is the thing that really stuck with me that I'm not sure people, including our political leaders, have taken to heart. This, yesterday, in my view, is the de facto launch of Cold War 2.0. Medvedev says that its bid to forge ties with the West after the 1991 fall of the Soviet Union is now over, and Russia will develop ties with other powers such as China. It's a de facto acknowledgement of the fracturing of the hegemonic nature of the dollar. And I think there's a lot of countries around the world who agree with Russia that they don't like that. The dumbest president we've ever had has just opened the door for the collapse of the dollar. This is bad, and most people are too busy yelling about sending MiGs from Poland, which would only exacerbate this problem.
Yeah, and the sanctions, the sanctions make it worse, not better, because what the sanctions are telling serious Russians, the oligarchs, and serious Chinese is that if you step out of line from the way America wants
Steal
you
your
to
stuff.
do things, yeah, we're going to confiscate your yachts and your property and all your things.
No trial.
And so they're like, well,
No
you know
evidence.
what? Maybe, yeah, right. There's no process. There's no due process. So if you're a guy in China who's worth a couple billion, maybe building relationships with Russia, Saudi Arabia, and other countries where again, you've talked about the petrodollar, and if the petrodollar is at risk, the dollar is at risk. And these guys start having these types of conversations in many ways because of the sanctions.
Yeah.
So the sanctions force them to have this dialogue. And that's something that I don't know that everybody is playing chess in this administration necessarily as much as they're playing tic-tac-toe.
Exactly. Well, John, we're just about out of time here with this introductory segment, but we're going to be back in 5 minutes. People can join us on subscribestar.com/IamJohnCullen, patreon.com/IamJohnCullen, and subscribestar.com and patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. Please join us if you're not already a sponsor, even if you're just watching the free content that John and I and the other guests on Crowdsource the Truth offer on YouTube and on Rumble and on Odyssey. Please join Odyssey. That's showing a lot of promise, and they're talking about introducing a new Patreon-like feature that I hope will allow me to reintroduce the most economical monthly sponsorships I've offered. But there's going to be a great conversation happening, lots of evidence and information to be revealed on the Subscribestar and Patreon show. So join us now. We'll be back in just under 5 minutes. We're going to be looking at this testimony from the owner of the laptop repair shop and a lot of other information in this deck that John has created. We've got Lavrov sitting right
Johnny
there.
Hoover Channel tonight. Johnny Hoover Channel
tonight.
2 hours from now, give or take, it's going to premiere the full documentary about John Paul MacIsaac on Johnny Hoover.